Hello everyone and welcome to the Gaming Growth Analyst. My name is Anthony and today we'll get spooky. I think sometimes when you work in data analytics you don't have a lot of interaction with other people working in other companies. The main reason being data is a very sensitive subject in every business and you cannot really share a lot of things with others. And I think it's sad. In development you probably can share some ideas and stuff, but in data I feel like we're sharing less. Today is for those data practitioners out there that want to see other people having issues like they do have right now and see how those people handle those issues, but also leadership and senior manager that should be aware of those issues and aware how it can impact their team and the profitability of the business as a whole. Let's start with the first story. For every story, I obviously not name anyone, not name any company, not give any years, and things that happened over the last 10 years. The people giving me those stories are coming from different field, always in gaming. Obviously, we're a gaming focused podcast, but just don't try to guess where it's coming from. My first story is coming from a data practitioner that was working on architecting the new events for a new feature. That game was about to launch with a new feature, new content, whatever you can think that needs new event design for it specifically. And someone senior on the team came in and told him, listen, stop whatever you're doing right now and work on this piece of analysis for a stakeholder. The other data practitioner obviously said, no, I want to work on this first. And after a bit of I would say a genuine, it's not a fight, but you see what I mean, like a disagreement, he managed to get his way. I think it's another story because that's a lot of stress, right? Trying to stand up to the more senior person in the team, knowing that the more senior person in the team is wrong. Why was it wrong? Well, for a simple reason. If you have a new feature that releases and you don't have any events for that new feature, how do you know if that new feature is going to be performing? And how are you going to answer when stakeholders is going to come and say, well, I want you to analyze this on this? What are you going to say? Sorry, I could not do it because you asked me to do that other analysis? No. The stakeholders is not always aware of the impact or not always realizing it. Maybe on the moment it is going to be like, no, I want this analysis faster and we can figure out the feature later. But I think not having data is bad. Like if you launch something out there and usually you're a data focused company and you don't do the effort to try to structure your sprints or your schedule to take those into account, it shows that you're not really a data company or you're just not aware of how bad it can be for your business, right? I think in this specific case, the data practitioner did it very well. It stand up to a senior person, and the senior person was obviously in the wrong in this case. The senior person should have said, listen, this is a very important analysis. Can you do it after you implement the data? Because obviously, from what I know, a few weeks later, once the feature was implemented and live, they asked him a deep dive analysis about the feature, which he could have not do in the first place if he did not implement the data before doing the very important analysis. For data practitioner, you're not alone. Sometimes saying no is the best way to move forward. For senior manager and leadership, think about the fact that not having data is gonna penalize you in the long run. Like if something is out there and you don't capture the data, you will never capture the data again. And some of those metrics are going to be not trustworthy. So for example, for that new feature, if you wanted to check the amount of unique users that interacted within the first 24 hours, well, you can't. And even if you want to look at the longer term, you're going to have a massive bump and have skewed data. Your data is going to be worthless compared to if you just did the right thing from the start. So when possible, try to balance the workload of your analytics team in order for them to be able to implement what's required of them. So that's the first story. The second story is a data practitioner joining a new business, and obviously the business has current reporting system in place and they just want to improve on those. However, the reporting system was built upon a very bad code with a ton of issue, and it was like thousands and thousands of lines of something that should have taken like way less, like 100 SQL line tops. And the reason for that is there was multiple reasons, obviously, but the data practitioner came in, saw that, was like, oh God, and his manager told him, well, can you make it better? And his solution was just to ignore it. Just look past the problem and just do something else on the side. Um, Later down the line, obviously, the code has been refactored, things have been looking better, and at some point, they managed to get everything back on track as it was supposed to be. So a few hundred lines of SQL code instead of a few thousand lines of actual R code or Python code. I think the data practitioner in this situation should have done a better job to step up. But the main issue is that that person just joined the company, so it was really hard to get in and say, listen, you're doing a shit job, let me do the real job, right? And I think that's something that can happen to any data person out there, is you join the company and you have your opinion about how things should be run. And it's sometimes really hard to stand up for yourself and say, listen, that's not how you should do it. You should do it that way. And not every company out there is going to be looking for advice or is going to be open for those advice. So I'm saying you should have done it differently, but that's in hindsight, obviously. And maybe at the time it was better to just stay quiet and leave it on the side until that person was able to do something about it. I think for the management and senior management is understanding that that's not how data works. Like, you're not supposed to read thousands and thousands of lines of code for something as simple as a reporting. We all have reportings that are really bad, but if it's that bad, you should take into account the fact that it's way too bad for what it was supposed to be, because most reporting should be automated and not require a lot of work. And obviously, we're always going to have technical debt. We're always going to have bad coding practices going into those things. But having a clear review system, not only a review of the code when you deliver a deliverable, when something is given to a stakeholder, but also review of what you've been built and how can you make those things better, are very important for the whole ecosystem of your data structure to be actually manageable, right? And I think in this case, that obviously I'm saying he did it wrong, but I don't have a lot of more context, hey, about it, and I think it's gonna depend also on the vibe he has from the business and his manager. But my lesson for this is, as a data person within the business, if you feel like you can step up for yourself. If you feel like you can't, just don't. And I think it's a very vibe level base. I'm saying you should, but I'm a head of data. So if I go somewhere and I say, listen, this is bad, you should not do this way, end of discussion, right? And that's also my personality. That's the way I handle people, and that's the way I handle bad work being done, and it's maybe not your way. Um, but yeah, I think it's just bad. I think it's our job as data people sometimes to say it's bad. Sorry, I was ranting for a bit. It's a complex situation. It involves a lot of parameters. I recognize that. My third story is a first-time user experience flow. So that data practitioner came into company, and the company said, "Well, listen." After a while, I think it was already settled within the business. The business came to him and said, listen, we need to do a first-time user experience analysis of this game, understanding what people drop off, why do they drop off, and all the things. The person started to look into the raw data, obviously one of the first time, checking what you have available, and noticed that sometimes the same user had multiple events that were not concording with each other. Like sometimes 2 times the same event with different parameters, sometimes 2 different events, but at not the right step, like the step 5 was before the step 4. Like plenty of issue basically, and the data practitioner came and was like, no, I cannot do it, and just asked for the dev to fix it, right? In this situation, very clearly, the data practitioner did his job. Checked the raw data, made sure that the data was there or not, saw that there was an issue and said, listen, cannot do it, fix it, and then I'll do it. And I think as a business, the mistake was there was no, why was the data wrong in the first place, right? We're talking about first time user experience. If you miss some data points later down the funnel of a user, it's still a problem, don't take me wrong, but it's harder to detect in QA or that kind of thing. So maybe that business did have or doesn't have any QA for data for every update, which is not fine. That's not okay. You should at least check it once, and at best check it every time you do something related to it, but at least check it once to make sure it's coming true, right? Because as I explained it in my ebook about data quality, that data does not for truth. You have nothing to compare against. So when you look at it, you're hoping that it's right. And the best way to make sure that it's right is to check it against actions, actually manually testing it. I think in that sense, the fault came from the business. But it's absolutely awful, right? You come in You come in, you want to do that piece of analysis, and you realize that, well, the data is against you, and it's not like you can really fix it. Actually, I'm against fixing data most of the time. I think that's a lazy option. I think the good option is to work toward making processes that allow your data to be used correctly instead of trying to fix it after. So those were my 3 hour stories for data practitioners. I hope if you're a data person, I hope it makes you feel a bit better, maybe, or see how the people handle their choice, how I would have handled it with my experience and my knowledge today. And for managers, leadership, and everyone, again, take your data as a first-class citizen. If it's a wrong data, it is worse to have wrong data than no data, and no data is bad. So just have correct data from the start. It shouldn't be that hard. But it feels like every time I'm talking to other data people, it's the same problem. We're all trying to solve the same issues, but just in different businesses. And it can be irritating as a data person sometimes. In any case, if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. I'm definitely happy to open some discussions about how to handle bad senior manager asking you to do specific things that should not be done before others, or for the second story, which is the one is the most touchy about, or the last story, which is about the first time user experience. Let me know what you think. In any case, that was Anthony. Today was all stories for data practitioner. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.